All right. Awesome. So, Greg, it's great to have you, man. Um, so maybe to start, like how we know each other. Do you remember the first time we met?
I don't. I mean,
Yeah.
you
So
tell me.
no, I don't. But
Okay.
Greg and I went to business school together. So it must have been 1989. We both graduated in 91. Um, and Greg was one of my best friends at business school. Um, he So just by the way, I don't know if you knew, Greg's actually the godfather of my son Seamus, and Seamus is getting married in August and going to Harvard Law School next fall. So
Yeah,
he says hi.
it didn't take him long to overshadow you.
Exactly.
And I take my godparenting as the principal driver in that.
Yeah, exactly. Um, anyway, so like what I like to do is like try and like ask some big questions, like actually some kind of hard questions, and then kind of circle back to like the origin story.
Yeah.
So,
But by the way, I'll just say for these guys a couple things. One is you're very lucky because Tom is truly one of the greats. And although I don't remember the exact minute when I met him, I certainly remember a lot of our time together at business school and since then. And he's as good as it gets. So hopefully you figured that out by now. But if you haven't, stay close to him.
appreciate that. So, one like question that I don't know, like I just turned 60, or last year I turned 60, so like I've been doing a lot of reflecting. I'm sure you have too, because we're kind of getting old.
Yep.
As you look back, like what are you most proud of in your career or your life, either way?
Yeah, so it's definitely life and not career, and it's my kids. So it's probably the same thing with like you talking about Seamus. But uh, I'll tell you, being a parent is one of those things that somehow everyone always figures it out, but once it starts, you feel like completely unprepared for it, and then you spend the rest of your life trying to get better at it. But like with Tom's kids, my kids um, have uh, have done all right, not without the ups and downs, but have done all right, and that's probably the most important thing, but also the thing I'm most proud of.
Yeah, I'm getting this memory. We took the kids to a Yankee game when they were like really small, and like your son was screaming in the car, and like it was hell. I mean, it was hell. Like kids were little, and they all turned out
Yeah,
all right. Like I don't know how that happened.
exactly.
So like so these guys are all freshman, sophomore athletes. They're basketball, soccer, and rowers. So if there's like one thing that you did wrong that you'd like to warn them not to repeat, what would that be?
Hmm. That's a good one. I think uh, notwithstanding the fact that you and I have stayed in touch for a long time, I think earlier in my career, I um, I missed a lot of events because I had to work, and as I look back on it now, that was self-imposed. I at the time told myself I had to work. It was probably that I was choosing to work, and and although I didn't know it at the time, in hindsight, it really didn't matter. So I think maybe one of the things I regret and one of the things I've gotten better at over time is just balancing um, uh, when you have to do something, work or otherwise. And you guys probably see it in sports too. Obviously, there's a lot of time. And by the way, for background, I have three kids, but one of them played club lacrosse. But my two daughters both played lacrosse at Colgate, and so I get the time commitment sacrifices you make. But there are probably also times where you just have to kind of make the right choices. Sometimes I didn't.
So on the flip side, like what's the most fun you've had at work? Like what was like your best day?
Yeah, it's some of it, like announcing deals, is fun. So sometimes it's been like when you know something you're working on for a long time is going to happen. But the best things are, it's probably interestingly days when I've gotten letters from people who are resigning, which is an odd thing, but in investment banking, a lot of people just come here almost like junior college. They come to work for 2 or 3 years and then go work at a hedge fund or a private equity firm. And I've been lucky enough to work with some great people and kind of get a letter from someone talking about the impact you've had on them. That it's probably related to the kid thing, but that again is about as good as it gets.
What's like the coolest deal you worked on, or
Probably
one
the
of your
journal
favorites?
IPO.
That was the next question. Come on, man. Come on. Besides that, we'll get to that in a second. Yeah, so just for background for the guys, so we graduated in 91, and like I'm really not sure how exactly it happened, but I ended up being CFO of the Province Journal, which is this large media company in Province, Rhode Island.
I
We
know
sold our
exactly how
cable
it happened.
we sold our cable business for 1.4 billion, and then we had 12 TV stations and a bunch of other stuff. And after 175 years of being private, like I convinced the board to go public. Like I thought that was a good idea. And so part of what happens when you do that is you have what's called a bake off. So you basically it's like Kel, a group of them from different banks come in and pitch their wares to take you public. And part of that is their kind of their data on how good they are, who the banking team is going to be, who the stock analyst is going to be, et cetera, et cetera. And so I can kind of rig the deal. Because I'm pretty much calling the shots. And my friend Kel is working at Merrill Lynch. So like we're not going to hire anyone else other than Merrill Lynch, for God's sakes. So it turns out that Kel gets to take our company public, which was like one of the coolest things ever. And so, we listed on the New York Stock Exchange. I get to go watch our stock open on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange, ring the bell on the New York Stock Exchange. Like it was really pretty cool stuff for like a 31-year old. So I guess I'm just wondering what you remember of all that because it was a long time ago.
Yeah.
It was 1996. So like, but what were your recollections of that deal and how it went down?
So I remember a couple things. One is your path to CFO, and you guys might not appreciate it now, but it doesn't just happen that they decide to make someone CFO when he's 31 years old. So Tom's kind of always been remarkable, but that was incredible. I remember uh, you were in our offices together with the CEO, and I had this kind of senior old banker who's probably our age, but he seemed really old to me at the time, Barry Freeberg. And your CEO asked this question, you know, what do you think? Should we launch the IPO or not? And I remember very clearly Barry said, I've been around for a long time and I've seen the markets go up and I've seen the markets go down, and I think you should launch your deal. And your CEO turned to me and said, wow, stick with that guy. He's really insightful. And I'm thinking, he just said nothing. And yet, but he said it because he was so old. Your CEO is like, wow, that guy's really smart.
Yeah, so I mean, actually, this is kind of interesting. I'm sure these guys don't quite understand the dynamics. So, like, what happens is, like, we heard about this we actually had the CEO of our technology group on earlier this week. But and we talked about his roadshow and all that. But so what you do is you go out on the road and you like pitch your company 10 times a day, like for 3 weeks. It's exhausting all over the world. And after you make all these visits, institutional investors put in their bids to buy your stock, and they often they'll put in their bids at different price levels. And so you have a book of orders for your stock. Hopefully, you have many times the amount of demand than you have supply, and then the banker like Kel comes back to you at the like 11th hour and says, "Well, you think your company might be worth." In our case, it was worth $1 billion, but You think your company might be worth a billion too, and like we might be able to, float your stock at that level, but we think you should discount back so that on the first day of trading, there's a pop, and so that we have momentum going forward. And so part of, I don't know if that was the same conversation you're talking about, but you do have this sensation at the very end, like the banker is kind of squeezing you because, basically the buy side who are buying your stock are also their clients. So they also want to make those people happy at the same time while you're paying them millions of dollars of fees, right? So,
That's the way it
so
works.
there's, yeah, exactly. So this is how the sausage is made. So what just on that last little piece, like how do you when you're pricing an IPO, how do you think about what the discount should be and how do you kind of rationalize that to the company who you're taking public?
Yeah. So by the way, Tom described it perfectly. But one way to think about it is when you're buying stock in a company, if you're an investor, you can buy this new company that Tom's out there pitching, or you can buy one that's already traded that you own. And you just think about how to make those investments. And usually, because the new company has more risk, is a little uncertain, is not as well understood, usually investors say, I'm not, if it's all fair price equal, I'm going to buy what I know. And so if you want me to buy this new company that I don't understand as well, give me something. And usually when they say give me something that's like money, let me buy it at a discount. And so you may kind of look around and say, in the fullness of time, all these companies are going to be worth the equivalent of a billion too. But if you want them to buy this one, you have to sell it to them a little bit cheap. What you try to do is what Tom described is get enough demand that you can minimize that discount. The other piece of it that gets a little bit complicated is for both the company and for the bank, all demand's not equal. And so blue chip investors like Fidelity, T. Rowe Price, Putnam have a little bit of a halo around them, and companies prefer to have them owning the shares versus ABC hedge fund. Yeah, another client of mine in an IPO, we did the IPO for Valvoline, the kind of oil change and motor oil company. And in that case, we went through that exact same situation, and we were oversubscribed at $20 where they wanted to sell. We could easily sell it, but we were telling them you should instead sell your company for $18 a share so that we can get Fidelity and T. Rowe Price in. And he said, when I run an auction process and I'm selling something like generic, like a share of stock, I sell it to the highest price. And you're telling me you want me to sell it at a lower price so your friends can buy it and make $2 tomorrow. I said, that's exactly the way it works.
So just a last comment on the Providence Journal is like I have a very distinct memory of that day so like basically you price the night before and then your stock becomes freely traded the next morning, and so like it was very cool to be able to be on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange and watch my stock open. Um, but I remember I'm gonna get emotional now, but but uh but I remember after it was all over, we went and found Denise and the kids, and we were like on the playground and just hanging out. And I'm like, well, life didn't really change that much. Like,
I actually
uh,
remember that very well.
yeah.
Very
So I guess I'll go to the end, which is you've been doing this for so long. Like you said, like it's for many people, it's kind of just an in and out. And like if my math is right, you've been doing this for almost 35 years.
Yep.
Like, how the hell did you survive that long? Like,
Yeah, uh, I I love it, and it's a job, and I get that, but I think it's incredibly interesting, and I kind of spend my day looking at kind of different situations, different problems, all the time. I've also been able to, if you stick around long enough, your clients go from people being like your parents' age to being your friends, and so I have I have a lot of client relationships that are also friend relationships, and that in a way that makes it fun, but it also increases the commitment to make sure you're doing the right thing because your client is your friend. And by the way, it also helps to be married to Denise because she takes care of a lot of the other stuff. It's not a 50-50 relationship at home.
Yeah, I would concur with that. So let's go back to origin story a little bit. So where did you grow up and where did you go to college?
Yeah, so I grew up in Western Maryland in a town called Cumberland, and it's this is a little bit of kind of demographics and how things have changed. But in the 1950s, Cumberland was the second largest city in Maryland behind Baltimore, but the population also peaked in the 1950s. So it used to be a big industrial town, and all of those companies have left. And it's uh, for those of you who study economics, population growth and that stuff is really important to preserving a community. But I grew up there, went to Loyola College in Baltimore, and that's where I met my wife, although I didn't know she was going to be my wife at the time. And then after I graduated, moved up to New York.
And so like when you I guess one question that I'm kind of interested in is do you recommend that your analysts now go to business school?
Um, it depends. The one thing I strongly recommend is education and more education. So I um I feel like education's a great luxury. It's a luxury that most people, if they work here for 2 or 3 years, can then afford. And so my view is whether it's business school or law school or to get a master's in history or American literature, for a lot of the people who work with me who are then kind of say 25 years old figuring out what to do, I think it's a good time to take a break and learn more. It's hard to do that when you're 50 and you have a couple kids to say, oh, I'm going to take 3 years off and go study. So I'm a big advocate of graduate education for that reason. On business school in particular, um, if if you are in investment banking and you want to stay in finance, a hedge fund or private equity or otherwise, business school is probably just a waste of time and money because you can stay in that same career path and just keep moving forward. Um, uh, what I see is a lot of people use business school as a chance to pivot to a different career. They're in one, it's hard to get, like they're working with us as analysts. They want to go work at, Google, and business school gives them a chance to kind of reposition themselves and interview there. I know it's a little bit complicated, but
No, it's good. That's helpful. So you started in munis, right?
yeah, I
And so these guys might not even understand what the hell that is. So maybe explain what a muni is.
yeah. So I didn't either. But it was a job on Wall Street, so I took it. Um, and quite frankly, when I took it, I didn't understand how different it is than what I'm doing today because I was just I was excited to get a job. But um, uh, governments, state and local governments, the state of Massachusetts, the city of New York, are big financial entities, and they can and do borrow money to build big projects like a road, airport, otherwise, and they can do that and offer the investors earnings on those bonds, dividends, coupon payments on a tax-free basis. So there's a whole market that exists. It's kind of like corporate finance for companies, but it's instead for state and local governments. They issue a lot of debt to build hospitals, roads, bridges, tunnels. And that's the part of the business that I started in.
So it's muni bonds. There's no equity. There's no M&A.
Exactly.
And so you wanted. So I think I remember. What was your summer associate job in? Was it in corporate or was it in munis?
No, it was in derivatives. So I
And s-
yeah, go ahead.
and so then you had to like switch. Then you had to convince somebody to switch over to corporate.
I would have, and I don't know if I would have been able to make the argument. And this has happened to me many times in my life, but I got incredibly lucky, and I, I worked on I was working on a derivatives deal for a company, and as it turns out, the CEO of Merrill Lynch was involved in the coverage and showed up at the meeting. And uh, the next day back, I get a call from the head of investment banking to come talk to him. Have no idea where it's headed. I go up and meet with him, and he says, the CEO called me and told me you should work in investment banking. And I said, oh, thanks, that's interesting, really appreciate it. And by the time I got back down to the trading desk, my boss said, wait, they're moving your stuff. I heard you're moving to investment banking. So I didn't know it was going to happen. It's one of the best things that did happen to me, but it was completely random.
That's wild. Well, there's a moral to that story, right? God.
I guess so.
Um, so your original, so explain how corporate finance is broken up by industry. I think that'd be interesting to people.
Yep. Yep. So and I think most of the investment banks are organized the same way, and it's a little bit of a matrix of industry teams and product teams. Um, the the industry teams are aligned with clients. So I run our industrial business, but there's another business that is technology, another business that's healthcare, uh, real estate, and consumer products. So we just kind of align people who then have relationships and expertise with those types of clients. The other part of the matrix are people who specialize in products. So, like equity and IPOs, we have people who just do IPOs all the time across industries, but they know how to do an IPO, whether it's for a media company or a healthcare company or otherwise, or they know how to do uh, debt for those companies, or they know the ins and outs in M&A. As it turns out, most people end up in the middle. You have to know a little bit of everything to be successful, but there are specialists in industries and specialists in products.
So you started out in chemicals and then you kind of escalated up the food chain up to industrials.
Yep. Although I still have about a third of my coverage responsibilities in chemicals. They're the clients that I've known the longest. Um, and my industrials role really started as a manager role. And for us, it's kind of player coaches, but as a manager role running industrials. And then what happens over time is you end up just kind of picking up accounts there.
So, I'm watching the clock. I got a bunch of questions I still want to ask, but so I remember meeting with you having lunch during the financial crisis when Merrill
Okay.
Lynch was like kind of melting down and like your future was pretty up in the air.
Yeah.
Can you explain a little bit about like what that was like and like what was going on and how it ultimately got resolved?
Yeah. It's actually, it was, for me, it was this time of the year, but kind of go back in that period of time. Bear Stearns went bankrupt in, let's just say, like this spring, and I naively thought that and Bear Stearns was another big investment bank, and I naively thought it was just kind of contained with Bear Stearns. But I remember I was actually with Denise and the kids at Wimbledon, and I was working on a relatively big deal. It was a $21 billion acquisition. Um, Dow was acquiring Roman Haas. And as part of that acquisition, there were three firms involved, ourselves, Morgan Stanley, and Citi, and we were each going to loan Dow $7 billion for the cash to buy the company. And I remember I stepped out of the match at Wimbledon and called into our capital commitment meeting, and they told me, oh, the CFO of Merrill just came into the room. He's going to join the meeting. And that just doesn't happen. So I was kind of wondering what was going on. He asked me where I am. I tell him I'm at Wimbledon, and he says, we're gonna just stop this call. I'll call you on your cell phone in 5 minutes when I get back at my office. And then he tells me I don't know if we have $7 billion. And if I were smarter, I would have sold all my stock at that moment. Uh, uh, but as it turns out, the contagion was broader than just Bear Stearns, and it impacted a bunch of firms. And basically, what happened um, is all of these firms had um, a lot of debt that was sort of backed by agencies of the federal government, but not by the U.S. government, and a bunch of mortgages. And uh, and the thinking at the time was because the mortgages were diversified and in a big pool, something might happen to one or two, but it wouldn't impact all of them. And that was just wrong because something happened to a bunch of them, and it forced a bunch of firms under, including Merrill. We were lucky in that B of A acquired us, and they had a big balance sheet, and they did not have a very big investment banking group, so we just folded into that. For the most part, like the team I work with now is the same team I worked with at Merrill, but under the B of A umbrella.
It's funny, you know, like as we start talking, and I'm sorry for the students, but it's kind of like it just unlocks a lot of memories that we've shared, and like it just made me think. Like I remember talking to you on 9/11,
Oh yeah,
and you're like some fucking golf course somewhere, and I'm like, I mean, you were the first person I thought of. Like just so you guys know, like Merrill Lynch was like right there,
that was
like,
yeah,
and I was like, and all your friends are people from, you know,
yeah,
people who are
yeah,
at risk, you know, and I was like, holy shit.
yeah. That was not good. I was in many ways very lucky, and you can't work here or live where I do without knowing a bunch of people who died that day. Um, I was actually at Pebble Beach with a colleague and a number of clients, and and again, we were very lucky to be there, but that was like a family reunion that lasts too long because two of the guys with us had their own planes and kept thinking they were going to be able to take off and fly home, and it was a long time until we did that. But yeah, crazy days.
All right, let's lighten up. I'm sorry, I got deep. So what do you know, just in kind of general, like what do you think are the keys to what have been the keys to success for you, anyways, as an investment banker that, you know, these guys might be interested in?
Yeah, I think so. I think part of it, and by the way, I'm a huge advocate of sports, um, in particular women's sports. I know that that might not be as applicable here, but I just because I'm older, my sisters didn't have the opportunity to play sports growing up in the middle of nowhere and at the time. And I think a lot of business and life is similar to sports. And so those situations where whatever the coach likes someone more than you, or they say they're going to do it on times, and then you get the best time, and somehow someone else gets into the boat, or someone's not pulling his weight on the team. That stuff happens in life too, and at work. And what I see is the people who are athletes kind of roll with that and see it. And if you haven't been an athlete, it might be the first time you experience it is work. And that's a tough time to try to kind of learn about it and figure it out. So I think some of that just kind of discipline and commitment that you're going through with sports is a big part of it.
And we talk a lot, we're learning a lot in this class about effective communication. And I kind of like, you know, I keep saying like all of life is like a political campaign basically. And but how does that play out for you? I mean, you know, you're kind of constantly selling at some level. So
Yeah.
and so how important do you think particularly oral communication is in your job?
It it's huge, and it comes through in a couple of different ways. Probably the most important one, and by the way, I know these will all sound like things that you hear in generic, but a big part of it is listening. And a lot of times our clients tell us what they want to do or why it is that something makes sense to them. But I've seen a number of my colleagues who just get focused on what we want to say instead of listening. So listening is incredibly important. And I think the other thing that we do that we need to do is distill relatively complicated uh, structures or concepts to words that everyone can understand. And that in particular happens at board meetings where you get sort of a diverse group of very smart people, but from different backgrounds. Sorry,
Yeah.
my screen froze. Sorry. Um, but I think if you're not careful and you get too much into the mumbo jumbo or the details that are interesting to you, that might not be what's interesting to your audience. And you need to be mindful of that.
And I just had a couple students presenting last night on the art of networking and relationship building. So how do you think about, what's worked for you over a period of years in terms of strengthening the relationships you have with your clients, particularly?
Yeah. So, and I'll admit, I hate the concept of networking, even though I probably do it all day, every day. So, uh, to me, the difference though is, what I have tried to do is just to sort of get to know people and understand what they're interested in. And I think part of that is, and it's like with friendships, is sort of the continuous touch points. And so one of the challenges that I have is uh, how do I allocate my time? And some sometimes I'm not great at that, but I'll get busy on a particular deal and then pick my head up and realize I haven't talked to some of my clients for a long time. You need to go back out and do that. So I think some of networking is just being visible. The other part, and I try to over-index to this. I've I've over my career, I've been helpful to a number of clients who have lost their jobs, and uh, and it's those times when when someone gets fired, if you can help them find a new job, that's probably better than any kind of analysis you can put together on an M&A deal or otherwise. And it's the right thing to do, but I've seen with other colleagues where someone gets fired and they kind of just move on to the next person. Again, different people, different things, but I think that's another networking thing. And by the way, it's true with friendships too, right? Just taking care of whoever gets knocked down.
Yeah, 100%. We were talking last night about your, I don't know, you just called it touch points, but the idea of a drip campaign that like you build relationships over long periods of time and being there, like you just said, like, when they actually really need you the most.
Yeah.
And that keeps deepening and deepening the relationship. And it's not like, ultimately you're going to have a small group of like incredibly close clients or friends or whatever uh, that are established, through those joint experiences. Um,
Yeah.
so we're running a little out of time. So just, I know there's definitely guys on here who are interested. Can you just give a short overview of the analyst program at B of A, and then also like kind of what it is? I don't know how much you're even involved in hiring anymore, but like what it is that you guys look for in analysts.
Yeah. Um, so maybe I'll do, and then yes. So for for us, our analyst program is a 2-year program. But for most of the banks, it's 2 or 3 years. And then if you stay at the firm after that, you become an associate. So those are the titles: analyst and then associate. And then what happens is business school graduates also slot in as first year associates. So that's kind of the title structure. And and what we do with analysts, everyone's kind of we put together deal teams or client coverage teams that are kind of analysts through um, uh, more senior people, and you kind of just live and learn on the job. And in the analyst years, that's a lot of analytics, and it's actually a lot of PowerPoint. Um, so, the analytics can be around modeling cash flows for a company or comparing valuations of different companies that are competitors. And there's a lot of PowerPoint of saying, let's get that onto a slide that we can show to a board of directors. Um, in terms of one of the things I like about the job, though, is, and we're going through this now that the summers are in. It's happened since the time that I was a summer, but uh, people will be around for a year and say, "Gee, I'm not sure that I've learned a lot. I've been working really hard, but I'm not sure what I'm learning." And then the summers show up, and every year people say, "Oh my God, these people are so stupid. Where did we get these people? They don't know anything." I could say, yeah, that's what they said about you last year. All this stuff that you take for granted now, you didn't know any of it a year ago. So that's kind of what people do in terms of what we look for. And it's a little bit different because everyone looks for a little bit something different. We're trying to refine that to make it a little more systematic. But um, at a high level, what we look for is someone who is passionate and committed to the job, someone who's proven that they can overcome obstacles, and someone who has excelled at something. And that last one in particular, I mean, we would rather have an A student in uh, philosophy than a B plus student in finance and accounting. And our sense is we can teach people the finance and the accounting they need to know. But it's hard to be an A student and to excel at something. In the same way, we have a strong bias toward recruiting athletes. Some of it's they've been through the school of hard knocks, but they've also understand what's required to be excellent, and so we kind of look for those characteristics. There's also a piece of it that's um, it's meant to sort of test whether or not people know what they're getting themselves into, but there are some kind of questions asked around finance or otherwise. They're all on the internet. You can kind of look them up anywhere. Everyone asks the same 50 questions, and the questions or answers are out there and readily available. But um, that's probably the like technical part of the interview.
So, so again, these guys are freshmen and sophomores. So, just practically, if you, what would you advise them to like do in the next 12 to 24 months to like make the most of their time at school and get ready for whether it's banking or some other area of finance?
Yep. So, first of all, things like this. So this is a huge step in the right direction. Um, uh, I'd also say, like, don't let sports or academics suffer. And I realize that probably takes up about 110% of your available time anyway, but I wouldn't sacrifice that. But in terms of the job search, I think I think talking to as many people as you can is very helpful in two ways. One is you learn something in those conversations, you get a sense for what the job's like. But the second is going back to our hiring criteria, which are the same as all the other firms, they get a sense for whether or not you're genuinely interested and passionate about it. And so it works both ways. And I think it's a little bit, my guess is if you were to talk to 10 different investment bankers, we probably all sound the same. And then we talk about how different firms are. It's a little bit like with colleges, right? Where you say, oh, Wesleyan's completely different from Colgate, where my daughters went. And yet, if you're a sophomore in high school, you're like, hey, it's college. I think they're all the same. There's a little bit of that you can figure out over the next year or so, demonstrating your interest, learning something, and then figuring out, hey, maybe Morgan Stanley and B of A aren't the same place. Which one more I feel more comfortable with.
Cool. So I'll let the dogs loose, get a couple questions in here, and then I'll ask a couple, and then I'll let you go. I know you're busy, and I appreciate your taking this time. And I know we had to switch the time a little bit because you're negotiating some deal. Anthony, you got a question, buddy?
Yeah, I do. Thank you so much for talking to us. I was like really excited to come on this call actually. a lot of my questions were that I prepared were answered throughout this chat, but just a softer question, what qualities out and skills outside like soft skills, personality things, do you see in great analysts and like really good analysts that you remember and that carry along for you?
Yep. Great question. And some of it is um, just sort of passion, like genuine interest in the job. And then I'll give three. A second is attention to detail. Um, and just to hit on that one for a minute, banking and probably jobs are like different than college, or in that um, you have a couple typos on a paper and you might get an A- instead of an A. Um, if you have a couple numbers wrong in an analysis of a company, like you're dead. So it's kind of A or nothing. And so when people say attention to detail, it's easy to kind of nod and say, yeah, I'll pay attention to the details, but you need to understand there's just kind of it's hard to have middle ground there. And then the third thing is, and again, this is another area where we just see it comes very natural to athletes, is teamwork. It's probably misunderstood from the outside, but I'll just tell you what happens most nights here. And you've probably heard it, but guess what? Hours are long in this business. We're trying to make them better, but they're still long. But most nights, and we probably have in our New York office, let's say we have 60 analysts. Most nights at about like 6:30, 7 o'clock, the analysts all order food. A bunch of them go into conference rooms and eat food together and uh, do whatever. And then they come back out. They usually turn music on in the bullpen. And then the people who have a bunch of work kind of stay there to knock it out. The people who don't have work, for the most part, jump in and say, what can I do to help you? Like, let me take a piece of that, or here, I'll do this for you. And then whatever, 11 o'clock comes around and everyone says, well, let's go get a drink. And they go out like 11 to midnight and then come back in the next day. And I just say that because you might think like, oh, people get out of here as soon as they can get out of here. It's more the thing where everyone sticks around, and it's not FaceTime because I'm not around to look at them. It's people helping each other out, which to me just kind of speaks to that teamwork, and it's one of the most important. Because, by the way, if you're not used to doing that, then all of a sudden you're outside the team.
Yeah, that's great. Uh, Joe, got a question?
Yeah, sure. Greg, thank you for your time today. It was really cool hearing about all this. So, I saw in 2007 that you actually took a trip to China for the first time to help Blackstone work with a deal on China's Blue Star. And
Yeah.
so, when you worked that East and West deal, what were some cultural differences that surprised you the most? And how has that kind of shaped the way you approach international partnerships today?
So wow, good. You got to dig pretty deep to find that one. So good for you. Um, Yeah, so I'll say two things. One is our clients were global long before I was. Um, and most of my clients, and now most of the people who work here, have lived and worked all around the world. And it took me a while to figure it out, but there are real cultural differences that people need to appreciate. And um, and some of those are just social cues. Um, and it can be as silly as, where do different people sit? In the US, you go to a meeting, no one really cares who's sitting where. If you're in a meeting in Beijing, particularly with a state-owned entity, a government, it's really important to pay a lot of attention to who sits to the right and who. And the other thing is, like, by the way, here a lot of people don't wear ties, but what are you wearing a tie and what color is your tie, and that kind of stuff can make a difference. And it's easy to kind of roll your eyes at that stuff and say, I'm not going to follow because I don't care. And my view is that's just wrong. You're kind of there. You need to observe what they're doing.
All right, we'll work, try and work a couple more here, and then I have a couple last questions. Roy, you got a question?
I sure do. Hi, Greg. Thanks so much for your time. What is one decision or part of your career that if you could go back and do it differently, you would?
Yeah, I was late to take responsibility for my own career. So I probably spent the first 10 years almost at work, almost pretending like it was school, which is some version of I'm going to try to work harder than the people around here and produce better work than the people around here. And I was late to figure out that what gets valued and rewarded changes over time. And guess what? Once you're here for 5, 6, 7 years, no one really cares how hard you work. They care about the work product and what you're producing. And eventually people care about who your clients are and how much revenue you can generate. And that's incredibly obvious now, and it might already be obvious to you, but I was slow to pick that up. And so what I found is that where I thought I was, and I had been kind of a top of the class banker, that was rearview mirror. The rules changed, or the criteria changed around revenue generation, and I was slow to pick up on that. And I wish I had figured it out earlier.
All right, one more. John, you got a question?
Yeah. Hey, Greg, thanks for
Hey
coming in
there.
today.
Yep.
So my question is more broad. I'm not necessarily interested in IB per se, but I am more interested in a general sense how connections that you made either in undergrad, business school, or the first couple years of your professional life have impacted you as you've been establishing yourself in your career.
Yeah, well, you're looking at one right here with Tom. It's for the most important part for me is it's probably just like you with your connections at school or on your team. I just think those friendships are important to get you from one day to the next. And someday it may be that whatever, you're having a bad day or bad things happen to you, and it's important to have those connections and friends around. I don't know if that's how I kind of prioritize it. For me, it's not so much like, oh, I met someone and then they became a client. There are probably examples of that. There definitely are examples of that. But for me, it's more just that that you have friends around you to kind of help manage the ups and the downs.
Dude, I was your client.
See, he gets a double check mark.
All right, two last questions. We'll let you go. Number one, and I made all these guys answer the question, and everybody I talked to here. What's your favorite movie?
Miracle.
Really? Oh, wow.
I've probably seen Miracle like literally 100 times. For some reason, it was our kid's favorite movie, and so we just watched that on a loop. Love that movie.
We don't have any hockey players here, but we've been talking to a bunch of Wesleyan hockey players. So, and then the last one is just kind of easy. If you want these guys to focus on like one word or concept as they move on from here to kind of leave them with, what would that be?
I'd say integrity. And I think that's just that's an important one in sports and friendships and in work. People you just kind of know that people remember what you do. Life is long, and I think if you have integrity, it makes all those other things a lot easier.
It's been really fun, man. It's so awesome to see you, and
Great to
I'm
see
so
you.
proud. I'm so proud of you. Like you know,
Oh,
like I tell
stop,
one,
stop.
I tell my friend is like such a big shot. All right,
Hey
love you,
guys,
man.
stay close to Tom. Great spending time with you. Ping me if I can be helpful.
All right, talk to you later.
Yeah.
Thanks,
Bye.
guys.